Hey friends, quick thing before we start. For those of you who don't know, I've spent the past few years writing this book, and the good news is that it's finally released. It's called Lessons from a Terrible Photographer, and I want to try out a pitch on you guys. You're the first ones to hear it. I've been working on it for a few weeks, and here's my pitch. Influencers talk about cameras. This book, however, is about the things that cameras can't fix. You like that? Because the war is internal, and it's not technical. I'm so proud of that. The war is internal and not technical. Now, because I absolutely have no self-control when it comes to packaging, I'm a big design nerd. The launch is actually limited to a collector's box. It includes the book, which is signed and numbered. It has a signed print from me, a field notes notebook, and a hand-typed letter from me on my 1920s Corona typewriter. It's pretty cool. And there's actually much more swag in there too. It's a literal artifact. It's also $69.99. And I know that feels weird to say out loud, but printing costs apparently are absolutely insane. And I wanted this to be really special. So there are only 35 of these in existence, probably a lot less now. So if you want one, the link is in the show notes. And if that price sounds a little crazy to you, I get it. I totally get it. The standard hardback comes out in January, available for pre-order. Okay, on with today's episode. So you might have recently seen that Vanity Fair published a profile of Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles is the White House Chief of Staff, and it's paired along with a photographic portfolio of what they describe as Trump's inner circle. These photographs were made by photographer Christopher Anderson. And if you don't know Christopher Anderson, you should. He's a Magnum photographer, a member of one of the most prestigious agencies in the world. And he didn't get there by being polite. He actually got there by documenting events and things like the Haitian refugee crisis from a sinking boat. He got there by being a war correspondent. He spent his life in some of the most uncomfortable and dangerous places. And so when he walks into the White House, Christopher Anderson is not starstruck. He's looking for the same thing he looked for in the middle of the ocean, the reality of the human condition under pressure. He's not there to take a simple picture of a politician. He's there to document the weight. And so this particular story opens up in the Oval Office, and Wiles is meeting with the president and what she calls her core team. You have Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff. They're discussing things that they don't normally fit into neat headlines, structural things, power in its adult form, the filibuster, foreign leader, and consequences. And at one point, Wiles stands up and starts to leave. And the president looks at her and asks if it's an emergency. And Wiles replies, yes, it's an emergency, but it doesn't involve you. And then you look at these photographs. There's a group portrait, a long table that dominates the foreground, heavy and reflective, like the architecture, the kind of table that doesn't move unless somebody dies, right? The people around it look calm and measured. They're not heroic, not chaotic. They're just present, like this is a normal Tuesday. Wiles sits centered, hands folded upright. There's a close-up portrait of her face, dead center, not flattering light, no soft diffusion, just skin texture intact, time visible, eyes open and unblinking. There are portraits where the camera is just too close, uncomfortably close, where context disappears and all that's left is texture, skin, fatigue, and mouths that don't resolve into smiles. There's a black and white portrait of Stephen Miller that isolates him from the rest of the set, draining the present tense out of the image. But this episode is not about politics. It's not about portraiture technique. This is about what happens when a photographer refuses to make power look comfortable. This episode is about why most photographers, myself included, stop being authors and become decorators, and why framing is the only thing that can make us dangerous again. Well, if you don't know me, my name is Patrick Fore, and this is the Terrible Photographer podcast, where we have honest conversations about creativity, identity, and finding your voice. This episode, it's a bonus episode, friends. It's part of a loose series I've been calling Basics Deconstructed. And the idea here is simple. We take some of the most basic concepts in photography, the words that we throw around like we understand them, and then we pull them apart, we take them apart. And it's not to teach you how to use them, but to remind you what they actually are in their core essence. Today, friends, is episode 42. We've made it to number 42. I'm calling it framing. And today we're talking about authority and distance and power, and how as photographers we often give our power away. If this is your first episode, welcome. Feel free to jump around. These are in no particular order. And as always, you can email me anytime with questions, thoughts, hate mail. I respond to everything. My email is in the show notes. With that being said, let's get into it.
From dusk till dawn, I turn my speakers on. Why they wanna play with the king? I told them meet LeBron. There's darkness in my city, wrong moves, and you won't see the sun. They be talking loud, but never been where the creatures hunt. And bleed for this dream, so why your eyes closed? Been running through the pain. Look at me and now my strides go. Every single scar on my skin, another milestone. Battles in the dark, came out shining with the lights on. Look, but I don't think they listening. I don't think they heard.
Okay, so let me start with what we're all taught. Framing is composition. It's the rule of thirds. You have your leading lines, headroom and nose room, negative space, the decision to shoot wide or shoot tight, horizontal or vertical, where you place the horizontal line. It's geometry, you know? And if you go to photography school or watch enough YouTube tutorials or scroll through educational Instagram posts, that's what framing really has been reduced to, a technical decision about where to put things within the context of a rectangle. Shoot a portrait, put the eyes on the top third. Shoot a landscape, don't split the frame in half. Shoot a product, center it or don't, depending upon the trend this particular month. And listen, I'm not saying composition doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But calling composition framing is like calling a hammer carpentry. The hammer in this case is a tool. Carpentry is what you actually build. So I want to talk about something that makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And when I looked at these images from Christopher Anderson, it kind of rose from within me a series of questions and self-doubt that I didn't really know that I had or expect to think about on a random Wednesday in December. I think that if I, Patrick Fore, would have walked into that room in the West Wing, Susie Wiles at the table, I am not sure I could do what Christopher Anderson did. And I know that sounds even arrogant to think about, right? Because I'm not Christopher Anderson. I'm not a part of, the Magnum agency. I haven't done anything in comparison to his career. But even on some small level, if I'm really honest, if I were to be in that room in the White House, I think I would cower. I think I would cower to the moment, the people, the room. I think I would default to making them look like heroes because that's what I've been trained to do. That's what I have experience in. That's what my hands know how to do before my brain even makes a decision. Yesterday, ironically, I photographed the CEO of a SaaS company, tech company, downtown San Diego. It was a portrait session and I didn't know him. I really didn't know his company or what they did beyond sort of the most basic fundamental level. I didn't know what he had built, his history, his story, or what he had burned down to get there. And instinctively, I tried to make him look better than what he was, you know? It wasn't even a thought, right? I put him in flattering light, slightly up angle, gave him hero energy, styling conversations about something being on brand, but approachable, but still a leader. Everything was about making him look good. Because that's me doing what I do. That's what I'm good at. And that's what they paid me to do. But what Christopher Anderson did here was that he refused to flatter. He refused to smooth, refused to make power look comfortable. And that takes a level of courage I'm not sure I have. It also takes experience. It takes an almost superhuman ability to read a room and decide, I'm not here to make you look better. I am here to show what power actually costs and what power actually looks like. And I don't know if I could do that, but I want to understand why. And this is what I've been thinking about for the past night or so. And here's what I'm learning. Composition is where the chair goes. Framing is who gets to sit in it. Composition is technical. Framing is authorship. Framing decides who gets context, what gets distance, what gets normalized, what gets treated as inevitable. Framing answers the question, how should this feel before anyone decides what it means? And that, my friends, is power. I want you to look at the Stephen Miller portrait. And if you don't have the images in front of you, take some time later to look at these images and study them. Look at the black and white Stephen Miller portrait specifically in the Vanity Fair set. It's so close. It's almost rude. He looks older than you would expect. He looks tired. Like being the villain that he is, it just takes a toll. And that same treatment runs through the entire portfolio, like I said in the opening. On the women, you can see makeup as makeup, the unflattering skin lines, the texture, the smudges, the imperfect eyeliner, the things that usually get sanded down because we've been taught that professional means smooth. On the men, it's the same thing. Vice President J.D. Vance, the vice president, has dryness and skin flakes on his lips. There's texture in his eyes. There's stress and lines. They're baked into the skin. Nothing is cleaned up. And if I shot this, and perhaps if you shot this, we would retouch it. I know I would. I would open Capture One. I would grab the heal tool. I would open it in Photoshop. I would dodge. I would burn. I would start erasing humanity like it's a liability. But here, the humanity, it stays. Christopher Anderson made sure that it stayed. Vanity Fair made sure that it stayed. And this was not a technical decision. This is framing because it changes what power feels like. It's not cinematic. It's not glamorous. It's just human and tired and above all, mortal. And then there's scale. These people are photographed as small in the room. When you look at these images, you think the room wins. Usually that's the opposite of how photographers treat leaders in our country. They make them feel larger than life. In this case, the room is the hero. And they almost become subject to it. The chairs, they feel oversized. The tables feel prominent. The walls feel like they've absorbed decades of decisions. And in the group portrait, again, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, does not dominate the frame. In fact, he blends in. He's one of the smallest people in the frame. He fades into the team. The system becomes the subject, not the personality. And that is a choice. Power here doesn't look like a man on a balcony. It looks like a meeting, a committee, a room that will still exist when people inside it are gone. And then my favorite image, there's a portrait of J.D. Vance, again, the vice president, framed next to a light switch, his back against a wall. And I think I know why this sticks out. Because I would have never, ever thought to shoot that portrait. This looks like, I don't even know what this looks like, but as any sort of a portrait artist, photographer doing this for any length of time would know that by any conventional standards, that is a bad shot. But this portrait was incredibly powerful. He has him against the wall right next to a light switch. You see the chips in the paint. You see the imperfections in the frame. But that light switch, I would have never left that in. You would have never left that in, right? We would have put him on a cleaner background. We would have at least cleaned the wall. We'd make it timeless. We would have removed the light switch. But Anderson left it in. The light switch is a metaphor for the entire administration. I used to think this whole thing was about technical skill, right? Photography is about how to light, how to frame, how to direct, how to pose, but it's not. It's about deciding whether you're going to make someone comfortable or make them visible. And those things are not the same thing. Most photographers, most of us, and I'm including me in this, stop thinking this deeply about framing years ago. For some of us, we've never thought this much about framing. I know I have never really thought about framing in this way. I started thinking about client expectations and I started framing for Pinterest boards and trends and algorithms and portfolio reviews. What worked last month? What might get me hired? And slowly, the frame stopped being my frame. I didn't lose my voice. I just outsourced it. And here's the irony of this whole thing, the brutal irony, is that photographers are some of the only people walking this planet with the tools to shape meaning. We spend most of our time using these tools to make images look like someone else's mood board. But friends, we have a weapon in our hands, in our Pelican cases. We have a weapon, but oftentimes we use this incredibly powerful weapon to make beige. And I don't say that to shit on anyone. I don't want to shit on the wedding photographers or the commercial shooters or the portrait artists or the baby shooters or the landscape photographers. But every photograph frames something. A senior portrait, it frames adulthood. A wedding photo frames love and tradition. A brand image frames authority and trust. Your Framing. You're doing this, whether you acknowledge it or not. The danger here isn't client work. The danger is autopilot. And autopilot is just someone else's framing running your camera, somebody else's decisions running your camera. There's this lie that keeps photographers feeling trapped. And it sounds reasonable, you know? My job is to give people what they want. That's bullshit. Your job is to frame what you as the artist, what you as the photographer see. Clients don't respond to compliance. They respond to clarity. Audiences don't respond to trends. They respond to intention. Your voice is not your subject matter. Your voice is your decisions. Distance, stillness, chaos, restraint, silence. Two photographers can shoot the same subject in the same room and tell completely different truths. This is nothing to do about gear. This is framing. And framing isn't about control. Framing is about responsibility. You're responsible for what an image makes feel inevitable. And you're responsible for whether the world enters your frame as a trend or as a truth. Your voice is not your subject matter. Your voice is actually your decisions. And when I shot that CEO yesterday, I made success look effortless. I made leadership look comfortable. I made power look good. And maybe that's what he needed. Maybe that's what the brand needed. In fact, I know that's what the brand needed. But I also wonder what I didn't show, you know, the cost, the doubt, the toll, the humanity. But Christopher Anderson showed that, not because he's cruel, but because he's honest. And honesty in a photograph, especially these days, is fucking rare. So here's what I'm realizing. The power was never in the camera. It was never in the edit. It was never in the algorithm. It was actually in the frame all along, and it still is. And when you start authoring again, when you start framing for truth instead of comfort, something strange happens. Your work gets quieter. Your edits get simpler, and your choices, they get cleaner. And people start feeling something again. Not because you shouted, because you finally meant it. You're allowed to disappoint the Pinterest board. You're allowed to ignore the trend cycle. You're allowed to frame things in a way they feel to you, not the way that they're supposed to look. That's not arrogance. That's actually authorship. And when photographers remember that framing is a decision about what deserves to be seen and how it deserves to be seen, we stop being decorators of an image and we become dangerous again. You know, at the end of every episode, it's sort of the tagline, you know, the motto. I tell everyone to stay curious and stay courageous. And I never really talk about it. I just sort of include it, but really it's sort of the spirit of this whole thing. That motto is easy to say, you know, it looks good on a t-shirt. But Christopher Anderson's work here in the West Wing is really what that motto looks like in its purest and most terrifying form. It really exemplifies it in all its essence. Curiosity, friends, is walking into the most powerful room in the world. And instead of looking for the official shot, you look at the texture of the man's skin. You look where the light switch breaks the perfection of the wall, and you ask the question, you ask what is actually here, what is happening here, what are the unspoken rules here, what is the unspoken power dynamics at play. Courage, though, is the harder part. Courage is actually having the Vice President of the United States in your frame and refusing to cower. It's asking the Vice President, hey, can you stand over here next to the light switch? Are you kidding me? And it's the courage not to fix it. Not just for Christopher Anderson, but to the entire Vanity Fair organization. But it's honest. Refusing to cower. Refusing not to fix it. Not to flatter. Not to perform. It's the courage to rise to the occasion by being exactly who you are, rather than who they expect you to be. He didn't shoot what the White House wanted, right? He didn't even shoot what Vanity Fair probably expected. I don't know the scope or the brief that he had, but he shot what he saw in the way that he saw it. And that, my friends, is the leap from being a technician to being an author. And that leap really is always made of courage. Listen, I don't know if I could walk into that room and do what Christopher Anderson did, right? Maybe it's a question that you should ask yourself. But the truth is that most of us will never be asked to photograph the White House Chief of Staff. We won't be asked to frame the architects of our nation. Our West Wings in what we do as photographers are so much smaller. It's a kitchen table where a marriage is quietly framed. It's a studio where a high school senior is terrified of their future. It's a street corner where a stranger is just trying to exist. It's in these moments we have a choice. We can use our cameras to smooth the world. We can use the heal tool to erase the fatigue, the fear, the truth of what it costs to be alive right now. We can keep making beige with our cameras, or we can be brave enough to leave the light switch in. We can be brave enough to let the room be bigger than the person. And maybe that's what being a terrible photographer really is. It's being terrible at following the rules. It's being terrible at giving the powerful the PR that they wanted. It's being terrible at making the world look beige and comfortable and on trend. And if you can do that, if you can frame the truth instead of the trend, right? Or the mood board, or the Instagram post, and you're doing the work. So, as you head into your next shoot, remember the table. Remember the light switch. Don't just move the chair. Decide who gets to sit in it. So, until next week, stay curious, stay courageous, and yeah, stay terrible.